The crack of the gavel echoed through the dusty town square of Redemption Creek, Colorado, as Harriet Montgomery's fate was sealed with a final bid of $300. The summer of 1878 had brought drought to the land and desperation to her heart, but nothing had prepared her for the cruel twist that would see her auctioned off like cattle to the most feared man in the territory. Harriet stood on the wooden platform, her honey-brown hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders, blue eyes glistening with unshed tears as she refused to give the leering crowd the satisfaction of seeing her break. At 22, she'd already endured more than most women twice her age, the loss of her parents to fever, the foreclosure of their small farm, and now this final indignity. "Sold. To Mr. Jeremiah Black," announced the auctioneer, a thin man with yellowed teeth who avoided looking directly at her. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Even in a frontier town where life was cheap and mercy scarcer than rainfall, the selling of a woman, even under the thin pretense of a labor contract, was uncommon enough to draw attention. That it was Jeremiah Black who had purchased her contract only added to the spectacle. Black approached the platform, his weathered face set in a permanent scowl beneath his wide-brimmed hat. At 55, he owned the largest cattle ranch in the territory, along with most of Redemption Creek itself. What he couldn't buy, he took. What he couldn't take, he destroyed. "Get in the wagon," he ordered, not bothering to look at Harriet as he tossed a bag of coins to the auctioneer. From the edge of the crowd, a tall figure watched the proceedings with a tightening jaw. Isaac Reed had only been in Redemption Creek for 3 days, having ridden in from Wyoming looking for work. At 30, his face bore the weathered look of a man who'd spent his life under the open sky, his dark hair curling slightly beneath his hat, eyes the color of a storm cloud fixed on the scene before him. "That ain't right," Isaac muttered to the old-timer standing beside him. The white-bearded man shrugged. "Ain't much that is right when it comes to Jeremiah Black. Girl's father owed him money. When the fever took both parents, Black claimed she was part of the collateral, sheriff's in his pocket, so he arranged this auction to make it all seem proper-like." Isaac watched as Harriet was helped down from the platform by the auctioneer, her movements stiff with dignity despite the circumstances. When her eyes briefly met his across the square, something passed between them, a spark of recognition though they'd never met, a silent plea that stirred something deep within him. "Don't go getting ideas, stranger," the old-timer warned, noting Isaac's expression. "Black's got 20 men working for him, each one meaner than a wounded rattler. Last fellow who crossed him ended up face down in Wolf Creek, but Isaac Reed was already moving, following at a distance as Black led Harriet to a wagon at the edge of town. He'd seen enough injustice in his life to know when something demanded action, regardless of the cost. "Miss," he called out, just as Black was about to help Harriet into the wagon. Both turned, Black's face darkening with irritation. "Move along, cowboy, this ain't your concern." Isaac approached slowly, hands visible at his sides, just wondering if the lady might need some time to collect her belongings before leaving town. Harriet's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of hope crossing her face before she carefully masked it. "She's got nothing worth collecting," Black growled, "and she's no lady, she's property, fair and legal." Isaac's hand instinctively moved toward the pistol at his hip, but he stopped himself. This wasn't the time or place. "No person's property, Mr. Black, not in these United States, not since '65. Black laughed, a harsh sound like stones grinding together. "Shows what you know about law, boy. This here's a labor contract, all signed and sealed by Judge Peterson himself." He pulled a folded document from his coat. "She works for me until her father's debt is paid. Simple as that." "And how long might that take?" Isaac asked, his voice level despite the anger building inside him. "That's between me and my employee," Black said, his thin lips curling into what might have been a smile on another man. "Now, unless you're looking to join her in paying off that debt, I suggest you find your way to the saloon and mind your own affairs." Isaac looked to Harriet, who stood with her shoulders back despite the fear evident in her eyes. "Miss, is this your wish?" Before she could answer, Black grabbed her arm roughly. "She doesn't have wishes anymore. Get in the wagon, girl." "I can speak for myself," Harriet said quietly but firmly, pulling her arm free. "And while this isn't my wish, Mr. Reed, I have no choice. My father's debts are legally mine now." Isaac was surprised she knew his name until he realized the old-timer must have pointed him out earlier. The town was small enough that newcomers were noticed. "There are always choices," Isaac said, meeting her gaze directly. "And there's right and wrong, which stands above any paper signed by a bought judge." Black's hand moved to his own pistol. "You're new here, so I'll give you this one warning. Turn around and walk away, or you won't live to see sunset." Two of Black's men, who had been lounging against a nearby building, straightened up and moved closer, hands resting on their weapons. Isaac took a step back, not out of fear but strategy. "I'm not looking for trouble, Mr. Black, just making conversation with the lady." "She's not a lady anymore," Black said, his voice low and menacing. "She's mine." With that, he practically lifted Harriet into the wagon, climbed up beside her, and snapped the reins. The wagon lurched forward, heading north toward Black's ranch, leaving Isaac standing in the dusty street. "Told you not to get ideas," the old-timer said, appearing at Isaac's elbow. "That there's a death wish." Isaac watched the wagon grow smaller in the distance. "What's her story? Beyond the debt, I mean," the old man sighed. "Harriet Montgomery, good family. Father was a doctor before his practice failed. Mother taught at the schoolhouse until the fever took her last winter. Girls educated, refined even. Was engaged to a banker's son from Denver until Black started calling in her father's loans. Fiancé disappeared mighty quick once things got difficult. And no one in town stood up for her, against Black." The old man shook his head. "Might as well stand in front of a stampede and ask it polite like to go around you." Isaac nodded slowly, his mind already working. "I appreciate the information, sir. I believe I'll be staying in Redemption Creek longer than I planned." "Your funeral," the old-timer muttered, but Isaac was already walking toward the livery stable, a plan forming in his mind. As the wagon rattled along the rough trail toward the ranch, Harriet fought to maintain her composure. She would not give Jeremiah Black the satisfaction of seeing her break down, though inside her heart was racing with fear. "You'll learn the rules quick enough," Black said without looking at her. "Work starts before sunrise, ends after sunset. You'll cook, clean, and tend to whatever needs tending. You step out of line, you'll regret it." "How much is my father's debt?" Harriet asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "How long must I work to repay it?" Black chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. "Your father borrowed $2,000 over 3 years. With interest, it's close to $3,000 now, at $3 a week for your labor, minus room and board." He let the calculation hang in the air between them. Harriet did the math quickly in her head. At that rate, she'd be working for Black for nearly 20 years if he ever actually acknowledged the debt as paid. "That's not fair," she said, knowing the protest was futile but unable to stay silent. "Fair died with the Indians, girl," Black replied coldly. "There's only what a man can take and hold. I wanted your father's land, and now I have it. I wanted someone to replace my housekeeper who ran off last month, and now I have you. That's how the world works." They crested a hill, and the Black ranch came into view, a sprawling compound of buildings dominated by a large 2-story main house. Fields stretched in all directions, and in the distance, cattle grazed on the drought-parched grass. Under different circumstances, Harriet might have found the vista beautiful. "Home sweet home," Black said with a mocking edge to his voice. "For you, at least until that debt's paid, or until I tire of you." The implication in his words sent a chill down Harriet's spine, but she raised her chin defiantly. Whatever happened, she would find a way to survive and eventually escape. She thought of the stranger in town, Isaac Reed, and the concern in his eyes. In another life, she might have found his rugged features and quiet strength appealing. Now, she could only hope he had been sincere in his concern, though she knew better than to expect rescue. As they pulled up to the main house, a thin woman with gray-streaked hair emerged onto the porch, her expression wary. "Martha, this is the Montgomery girl," Black called out. "Show her to the servants' quarters and explain her duties." Martha nodded without speaking and beckoned to Harriet, who climbed down from the wagon without accepting Black's outstretched hand. "I'll manage on my own, thank you," she said quietly. Black's eyes narrowed. Proud, aren't you? We'll see how long that lasts. Harriet followed Martha into the house, aware of Black's eyes on her back. The interior was unexpectedly grand, with expensive furniture and decorations that seemed at odds with the rough exterior of the place. Martha led her through the main house to a small room off the kitchen. "This is yours," Martha said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was thin and tired. "There's a cot, wash basin, and hooks for your clothes." "Thank you," Harriet said, noting the room's single small window, barely large enough for a child to crawl through. "How long have you been here, Martha?" The older woman's eyes darted nervously toward the door. "Long enough to know you shouldn't ask questions and shouldn't trust anyone, especially not Mr. Black." She lowered her voice further. "The last girl who worked here, she didn't run away like he tells everyone. She—" Martha shook her head. "Just do as you're told and keep your head down." With that ominous warning, Martha left Harriet alone to contemplate her new prison. She sat on the edge of the hard cot and finally allowed the tears to fall, but only for a moment. Then, wiping her eyes, she began to take stock of her surroundings and plan. Back in town, Isaac Reed was making plans of his own. He'd secured a room at the boarding house and made his way to the saloon, where information flowed as freely as whiskey. The Broken Spur was crowded despite the early hour, filled with cowboys, miners, and local townsfolk. "Looking for work," Isaac told the bartender, a burly man with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. "Heard Black Ranch might be hiring." The bartender paused in wiping a glass. "Black's always looking for hands, especially this time of year. Pays good, but the work's hard and the boss is." He shrugged eloquently, demanding, Isaac suggested. "That's one word for it," the bartender replied. "Why Black's place specifically?" "Plenty of other ranches around that don't come with his reputation." Isaac shrugged. "Heard he runs the biggest spread in the territory, figure that means steady work." A man at the end of the bar, dressed in the dust-covered clothes of a cowhand, laughed bitterly. "Steady work and an early grave, more likely. Black goes through hands like most men go through matches." "That's so." Isaac turned to the man, seeing an opportunity. "You work for him?" "Used to. 3 months was all I could stomach. Name's Peterson, Luke Peterson." He extended a calloused hand, which Isaac shook firmly. "Isaac Reed, mind if I ask what drove you off? Always good to know what I might be getting into." Luke motioned to the empty stool beside him. "Sit down, Reed. I'll tell you what kind of devil you'd be selling your soul to." Over the next hour, Isaac learned more about Jeremiah Black and his operation than he could have hoped. Luke Peterson had been a foreman at the ranch until Black had accused him of stealing cattle, a false charge designed to avoid paying him his wages. Luke had barely escaped with his life and was now waiting for enough money to move on to California. "And the women at the ranch?" Isaac asked casually after they'd had a few drinks. "Heard Black just acquired a new housekeeper today." Luke's expression darkened. "That auction business. Town's talking about nothing else. It's not the first time Black's pulled something like that, though usually he's more discreet." "What happens to them?" Isaac pressed. "What do you think happens?" Luke replied bitterly. "Black claims they're servants, but—" He shook his head. "The last one, Betsy, sweet girl from Kansas, she supposedly ran off in the night. Truth is, she threatened to go to the federal marshal about what was happening at the ranch. Next day, she was gone. Black said she stole money and fled, but nobody believed it. Nobody did anything about it either." Isaac absorbed this information silently, his resolve hardening. "When would be the best time to approach Black about work? You're really set on this, aren't you?" Luke studied him. "What's your real game, Reed?" "Just looking for work," Isaac insisted. "And maybe to understand why a town lets a man like Black operate as he does." Luke snorted. "Fear and money, friend. He owns the bank, has the sheriff in his pocket, and employs half the men in the county. Cross him and you can't work, can't get credit, can't get justice." He leaned closer. "But if you're dead set on this foolishness, ride out tomorrow morning. That's when he usually meets with potential hands." Isaac nodded, thanking Luke for the information and the drinks. As he stood to leave, Luke grabbed his arm. "Word of advice, whatever you're really planning, don't. Black has eyes everywhere, and he doesn't forgive." "Appreciate the concern," Isaac said, dropping a few coins on the bar, "but I've handled difficult men before." Luke shook his head. Not like Jeremiah Black, you haven't. Dawn broke cold and clear over Black Ranch as Harriet was roughly awakened by Martha. Up, the older woman hissed. Mr. Black expects coffee and breakfast in 20 minutes. You're late already. Harriet hurried to dress in the plain gray dress Martha had provided the night before. She splashed water on her face from the basin and quickly pinned up her hair, trying to look as presentable as possible despite the circumstances. The kitchen was already hot from the wood stove, and Martha worked silently, showing Harriet where to find the coffee and explaining how Black liked his eggs fried hard with no runny yolk. Harriet moved quickly, determined to give Black no reason to find fault with her work. Girl. Black's voice boomed from the dining room. Coffee. Harriet picked up the pot with shaking hands and entered the dining room, where Black sat at the head of a long table. Two other men, ranch hands by their appearance, sat further down, watching her with curious eyes. About time, Black growled as she poured his coffee. After breakfast, Martha will show you the rest of your duties. I expect this house kept spotless. Yes, sir, Harriet said quietly, focusing on pouring without spilling. Speak up when addressed, Black snapped. Yes, sir, she repeated, louder this time. Black studied her for a moment, then nodded. Better. You might learn after all. The morning passed in a blur of chores: sweeping, dusting, washing windows, scrubbing floors. Martha worked alongside her, rarely speaking except to give instructions or warnings about Black's particular demands. Around mid-morning, Harriet was washing windows in the front parlor when she saw a rider approaching. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized Isaac Reed, sitting tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low against the morning sun. Martha, she called softly. Who handles hiring for the ranch? Mr. Black himself, Martha replied, entering the room with a basket of linens. Why? There's a man coming. I think he's looking for work. Martha peered out the window and frowned. Go back to the kitchen. Mr. Black doesn't like the house girls around when he's conducting business. Harriet hesitated. I know that man from town. Martha's expression sharpened. All the more reason to stay out of sight. Go on now, unless you want trouble. Reluctantly, Harriet retreated to the kitchen, but positioned herself near the door where she could hear what transpired in the main part of the house. She heard the front door open, voices, and then footsteps moving toward Black's study. In the study, Isaac removed his hat as he faced Jeremiah Black across a massive oak desk. Reed, is it? Black said, looking over a piece of paper where Isaac had written his name and experience. Says here you worked 3 years for the Rocking J in Wyoming. What brings you to Colorado? Change of scenery, Isaac replied evenly. Heard you run the biggest operation in these parts. Black leaned back in his chair, his cold eyes assessing. That I do. Also heard you were asking questions about me in town yesterday, at the Broken Spur. Isaac didn't flinch. Wanted to know what kind of man I might be working for. Seems smart business to me. Smart business, Black repeated softly. And what did you learn about me, Mr. Reed? That you run a tight ship. Expect hard work and loyalty, pay well for both. Black's thin lips curved in what might have been a smile, and nothing about my new housekeeper, the one you showed such concern for in town. Isaac met his gaze steadily. Heard she had debts to settle. Not my business beyond that. No, Black agreed. It isn't. He studied Isaac for a long moment. I need men who can handle cattle and trouble, sometimes both at once. My foreman, Wilson, says we could use another experienced hand with the fall drive coming. Can you start today? Yes, sir, Isaac replied. Got my gear with me. $10 a week, bunk in the hands quarters, meals included. You follow Wilson's orders and stay out of my business. That includes the main house and who works in it. Understood? Perfectly, Isaac said, knowing he'd just been warned away from Harriet. Black stood, indicating the meeting was over. Wilson's at the North Corral. Tell him I sent you. As Isaac turned to leave, Black added, One more thing, Reed. I give second chances rarely and third chances never. Remember that? Isaac nodded and left the study, placing his hat back on his head as he walked through the main house toward the front door. As he passed the kitchen, he caught a glimpse of Harriet, who had moved to the doorway. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave an almost imperceptible nod before continuing outside. Harriet felt a surge of hope at that small acknowledgement. He had come for her, or at least partly because of her. But what could one man do against Black and his entire operation? And why would a stranger risk so much for someone he didn't know? The days that followed fell into a grueling pattern for Harriet. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, spent the morning cleaning the main house, the afternoon washing clothes or helping Martha preserve food from the garden, and the evening serving dinner and cleaning up afterward. Black watched her constantly, finding fault with the smallest details of her work and making thinly veiled threats about what would happen if she didn't improve. Only occasionally did she catch glimpses of Isaac, working with the other hands in the distant fields or corrals. Once, when she was hanging laundry behind the house, he rode past and tipped his hat to her, but they exchanged no words. Black had made it clear that the ranch hands were to have no interaction with the house staff, particularly Harriet. A week after her arrival, Harriet was cleaning Black's study while he was out riding the property. Despite Martha's warnings about never touching his papers, Harriet couldn't resist looking for information that might help her situation. In a locked drawer, which she opened with a hairpin, she found her father's loan agreement and was shocked to discover that the original sum had been only $500, not the $2,000 Black had claimed. She was carefully replacing the document when a shadow fell across the desk. Jeremiah Black stood in the doorway, his face thunderous. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Harriet straightened, her heart pounding. "Cleaning, sir, as instructed." With my desk drawer open, Black advanced into the room. "Did I tell you to clean inside my desk?" "No, sir. I noticed it was sticking and thought I should." "Liar," Black cut her off. "What were you looking for? What did you see?" "Nothing, sir," Harriet said, backing away as he approached. Black moved with surprising speed for a man his age, grabbing her wrist in a painful grip. "I warned you about the rules, girl. Now you'll learn what happens when they're broken." Outside, Isaac was returning from a day of mending fences when he heard a commotion from the main house, a crash, followed by a cry that was quickly muffled. The few hands in the yard looked toward the house, then quickly found reasons to be elsewhere. Only Wilson, the foreman, remained, lighting a cigarette with deliberate calm. "What's happening in there?" Isaac asked, dismounting. Wilson shrugged. "Boss is disciplining the new housekeeper, I reckon. None of our concern, disciplining." Isaac repeated, his hand instinctively moving to his gun. Wilson noticed the movement and frowned. "Easy read. Whatever you're thinking, don't. That girl belongs to Black, legal and proper. He can do as he pleases with her." "No person belongs to another," Isaac said tightly. "Not in this country." "You really believe that?" Wilson asked, genuinely curious. "Look around you. The rich own the poor, always have. Black owns this valley and everyone in it one way or another." He blew out a stream of smoke. "Best accept that reality or move on." Another cry came from the house, and Isaac took a step toward it, only to find Wilson's hand on his arm. "That's a sure way to get yourself killed," the foreman warned, "and it won't help her none." Isaac hesitated, torn between immediate action and the knowledge that rushing in would likely end with both him and Harriet dead. "This isn't right," he said finally. "Right's got nothing to do with it," Wilson replied. "But if you're set on this foolishness, at least be smart about it. Black's having a big shindig tomorrow night celebrating some deal with the railroad. Most of the hands will be either working security or too drunk to notice much. Might be a better time to make your move, whatever it is." Isaac looked at the foreman with surprise. "Why tell me this?" Wilson's weathered face betrayed nothing. "Maybe I've been looking the other way too long. Maybe I'm tired of burying Black's problems in shallow graves, or maybe I just want to see how this plays out." He dropped his cigarette and ground it under his boot. "Either way, I never had this conversation with you." Inside the house, Harriet was curled on the floor of the study, her lip bleeding where Black had struck her. He stood over her, breathing heavily. "Let that be a lesson," he said. "Next time, I won't be so gentle. Now get up and finish your work. And if I ever catch you near my papers again, you'll wish I'd left you to starve in town." Harriet struggled to her feet, tasting blood but refusing to show weakness. "The loan was for $500, she said quietly. "Not $2,000, you lied." Black's face darkened again. The amount doesn't matter. You'll work until I say the debt is paid, which might be never if you continue to displease me." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Clean yourself up before dinner. I have guests coming tomorrow, and I won't have you looking like a beaten dog." Alone again, Harriet leaned against the desk, fighting tears of pain and rage. She had to escape, but how? The ranch was miles from town, and Black's men patrolled the property day and night. Even if she could get away, where would she go? Her home was gone, her possessions sold, her future foreclosed along with her father's practice. She thought of Isaac Reed and the silent promise in his eyes when he'd passed through the house. Could she trust him? Or was he just another man who would use her vulnerability for his own purposes? That night, as she lay on her cot in the small room off the kitchen, Harriet made her decision. She would find a way to speak with Isaac at the gathering tomorrow night. If he truly meant to help her, they would plan her escape together. If not, she would find another way. But she would not spend another week under Jeremiah Black's roof, not if there was breath left in her body. The next day dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for Black's celebration. Wagons began arriving by mid-afternoon, bringing ranchers, businessmen, and their wives from miles around. None questioned the presence of Harriet, who had been dressed in a plain black dress and white apron to serve food and drinks alongside Martha and two other women hired for the occasion. Black himself was in high spirits, having just secured a deal that would bring the railroad through his land, increasing the value of his holdings tremendously. He moved among his guests with unusual charm, every inch the gracious host. "Keep your head down and do your job," Martha whispered to Harriet as they arranged platters of food in the dining room. "Black's watching you extra close after yesterday." "I know," Harriet replied softly, "but I can't stay here, Martha. You know what he is, what he does to women like us." Martha's tired eyes showed a flash of understanding. "Just be careful, girl. Whatever you're planning, be careful." As the evening progressed, Harriet moved through the crowded rooms with trays of drinks, keeping her eyes lowered but searching for Isaac among the ranch hands who had been brought in to help with the event. She finally spotted him near the back door, seemingly on guard duty. Carefully timing her movements to avoid Black's attention, she made her way toward Isaac, stopping to offer drinks to guests along the way to avoid suspicion. When she finally reached him, she pretended to adjust the glasses on her tray. "Can you help me?" she murmured, not looking directly at him. "Yes," Isaac replied without hesitation, his voice equally low. "Tonight, after the party. There's a grove of cottonwoods behind the bunkhouse. Can you get there?" "I think so, once the house is quiet. I'll be waiting. If you're not there by midnight, I'll come for you." Before she could respond, Wilson appeared nearby, giving them a warning look. Harriet moved away quickly, her heart racing with equal parts fear and hope. The celebration continued well into the night, with music and dancing in the main parlor. Black grew increasingly drunk and boisterous, boasting about his new railroad deal and the fortune it would bring him. By 11 o'clock, many guests had departed, leaving only the most determined revelers and those too intoxicated to make the journey home. Harriet worked tirelessly, clearing plates and glasses, all while watching the clock and planning her escape. By midnight, the house had finally quieted, with Black passing out in his study and the remaining guests accommodated in spare bedrooms or departed for home. "Go to bed, girl," Martha told her as they finished cleaning the kitchen. "You look dead on your feet." "Thank you, Martha," Harriet said, impulsively hugging the older woman, "for everything." Martha stiffened in surprise, then briefly returned the embrace. "Go on now," she said gruffly. Morning comes early. Harriet retreated to her small room, but instead of undressing for bed, she waited, listening to the sounds of the house settling. When all was quiet, she changed into her old dress, the one she'd been wearing when brought to the ranch, and gathered the few possessions she had. A locket containing a small portrait of her parents, a handkerchief embroidered by her mother, and a small knife she'd secreted from the kitchen earlier that day. Slipping out through the kitchen door, she stayed in the shadows, making her way toward the bunkhouse. The night was clear and cold, the stars brilliant overhead. In the distance, she could hear the occasional lowing of cattle and the soft nickering of horses in the stables. The grove of cottonwoods loomed dark against the night sky, As she approached, fear gripped her. What if this was a trap? What if Isaac had reported her escape plans to Black to curry favor? What if Harriet? She nearly screamed as Isaac stepped from the shadows, leading two saddled horses. "You came," she whispered, relief flooding through her. "I said I would," he replied simply. "We need to move quickly. The night guard changes in half an hour." "Why are you helping me?" Harriet asked, needing to know before she placed her life in his hands. Isaac's eyes, silver in the moonlight, met hers. "Because what's happening to you is wrong. Because no one else would. Because—" He hesitated. "Because from the moment I saw you in that town square, I couldn't walk away." It wasn't a declaration of love. They were strangers still, but it was honest, and in that moment, it was enough. "Where will we go?" she asked as he helped her mount one of the horses. "West, to start. I have friends in a mining town over the mountains. We can stay there until we figure out our next move." He swung up onto his own horse. "Black will come after us, you understand that?" "Yes," Harriet said, gathering the reins in her hands. Despite the danger ahead, she felt more alive than she had in months. "I'm ready." They rode out quietly, skirting the main ranch buildings and taking a game trail that led toward the mountains. Isaac set a careful pace, fast enough to put distance between them and the ranch, but not so fast as to tire the horses needlessly. They would need endurance more than speed. "How long before they discover we're gone?" Harriet asked as they crossed a shallow stream, the horses' hooves splashing softly in the darkness. "Martha will find your bed empty at dawn," Isaac replied. "Black will notice my absence around the same time. We have maybe 5 hours before they start tracking us. And then," Isaac's face was grim in the moonlight, "then we ride harder and hope we reach the mountains before they catch up." They continued through the night, stopping only briefly to rest the horses. As dawn broke over the eastern plains, they had reached the foothills, the terrain growing steeper and more rugged. Isaac led them off the trail frequently, crossing streams to break their scent and taking rocky paths where hoofprints wouldn't show. "You've done this before," Harriet observed during one such detour. Isaac's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Not exactly this, but I've tracked and been tracked. Spent some time as a scout for the army a few years back. And before that." She asked, curious about this man who had risked everything for her. "Grew up on a small ranch in Texas. Lost it during the war. Since then, I've been moving around, taking work where I can find it." He glanced at her. "What about you, before all this?" Harriet hadn't spoken of her past in so long. It felt strange to do so now. "My father was a doctor. We came to Colorado when I was 16 after my mother died. He built a good practice in Redemption Creek, but then the silver mines closed and many of his patients couldn't pay. He borrowed from Black to keep the practice going, to keep helping people." Her voice caught. "He was a good man. He didn't deserve what happened to him." "Few do," Isaac said quietly. "The world isn't fair that way." They rode in companionable silence as the sun climbed higher. By mid-morning, they had reached a dense forest of pine and aspen, the trail narrowing to a thread between the trees. "We should rest soon," Isaac said, glancing back the way they had come. "Horses need water, and we could both use food." They found a small clearing near a stream, where Isaac insisted Harriet rest while he tended to the horses. She watched him work, noting the efficient way he moved, the gentleness with which he handled the animals. When he finished, he joined her on a fallen log, offering jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags. "Not much of a meal," he apologized. "It's perfect," she replied sincerely. After months of serving others, being cared for even in this small way felt like luxury. As they ate, Isaac kept his eyes on the trail behind them. "We should be safe for now, but we can't stay long. The pass ahead gets tricky and I'd rather navigate it in daylight." "Will they follow us into the mountains?" Harriet asked. "Black will," Isaac said with certainty. "He won't let either of us go easily. His pride won't allow it." Fear flickered across Harriet's face. "I've put you in terrible danger." "I put myself there," Isaac corrected her. "My choice, my consequences." "Why?" she asked again, needing to understand. "You don't know me, you owed me nothing." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, his eyes still on the distance. "I watched my sister suffer at the hands of a man like Black," he finally said, his voice low. "Her husband, I was too young to help her then. By the time I was old enough, she was gone." He met Harriet's gaze. Some debts you pay forward, not back. Harriet reached out impulsively and touched his hand. I'm sorry about your sister. It was a long time ago, he said, but he didn't pull away from her touch. For a moment, they sat in silence, connected by that simple contact and the understanding it conveyed. The moment was shattered by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Isaac was on his feet instantly, pulling Harriet up with him. They found our trail sooner than I expected, he said, already moving toward the horses. We need to move. Now. They mounted quickly and set off deeper into the forest, the trail growing steeper and more challenging. Isaac led them through streams and over rocky ground, trying to break their trail, but the sounds of pursuit grew steadily closer. They're gaining, Harriet said, fear evident in her voice. We're almost to the pass, Isaac assured her. Once we're through, we have a better chance. They emerged from the forest onto a narrow trail that wound up the mountainside. Below them, they could see riders, 5 or 6 men, with Black in the lead working their way up the slope. Ride ahead, Isaac told her, pulling his rifle from its scabbard. I'll slow them down. No. Harriet protested. I won't leave you. I'll be right behind you, he promised. But one of us needs to get through that pass. Go on now. Reluctantly, Harriet urged her horse forward, looking back to see Isaac positioning himself behind a large boulder that overlooked the trail below. She continued up the path, her heart pounding with fear not for herself, but for the man who had become her protector. Isaac settled behind the rock, rifle ready. He had no desire to kill even Black's men, were mostly just hired hands doing their job, but he would do what was necessary to ensure Harriet's escape. As the riders came into range, he fired a warning shot that kicked up dust near the lead horse's hooves. The riders scattered for cover, giving Isaac the moment he needed to remount and follow Harriet up the trail. Gunfire erupted behind him, bullets whining off rocks as he rode, bent low over his horse's neck. Ahead, the pass narrowed dramatically, barely wide enough for a single rider. Harriet had already entered it, her figure small against the towering rock walls. Isaac pushed his horse harder, knowing this narrow passage was their best chance. Once through, the trail split in multiple directions, making pursuit more difficult. A bullet grazed his arm as he reached the entrance to the pass, drawing a hiss of pain. He didn't look back, focusing only on catching up to Harriet, who had slowed at the sound of gunfire. Keep going, he shouted. Don't stop. They raced through the pass, the walls so close in places that their legs scraped against stone. Behind them, Black and his men had reached the entrance but were forced to proceed single file, slowing their pursuit. When they emerged on the other side, the land opened up before them, a series of ridges and valleys stretching toward distant peaks. Isaac led them immediately off the main trail, taking a deer path that wound down into a densely wooded valley. Are you hit? Harriet asked, noticing how he favored his left arm. Just a graze, he assured her. We need to find somewhere to hole up until dark. They'll be spreading out to search these trails. They rode deeper into the valley, eventually finding a small cave half hidden by fallen logs and underbrush. Isaac helped Harriet dismount, then led the horses further back among the trees, covering their tracks as best he could. The cave was shallow but dry, offering protection from both the elements and searching eyes. Isaac built a small, smokeless fire while Harriet tore strips from her petticoat to bind his wounded arm. You're good at that, he observed as she tied the makeshift bandage. My father taught me, she replied, her fingers gentle against his skin. He said everyone should know basic doctoring, especially on the frontier. Smart man, Isaac said, wincing slightly as she tightened the bandage. Yes, he was. Harriet sat back on her heels, studying her handiwork. It's not deep, but we should clean it properly when we can. They settled by the small fire, sharing the last of Isaac's provisions and listening for sounds of pursuit. As afternoon faded into evening, a comfortable silence grew between them, the kind that comes naturally to people who have faced danger together. What will you do? Isaac asked finally. After we reach safety, I mean. Harriet had been asking herself the same question. I don't know, she admitted. I have no home, no money, no family. She looked up at him. What about you? I was headed to California before all this, he said. Heard there's good land there, reasonable prices. Thought I might try ranching again on my own terms this time. That sounds nice, Harriet said softly, trying to imagine such a peaceful life after all that had happened. Isaac studied her face in the firelight. You could come with me, he suggested, his voice carefully neutral. If you wanted to, I mean you'd have your own place, your own life, but I could help you get started. Harriet felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. That's very kind of you, not kindness, Isaac said, meeting her eyes. He looked away, uncharacteristically at a loss for words. I just think we make a good team. Before Harriet could respond, a sound outside the cave froze them, both the soft clink of a spur against stone. Isaac moved instantly, dousing the fire and pulling Harriet deeper into the shadows. His hand found his pistol as a figure appeared at the mouth of the cave, silhouetted against the fading daylight. I know you're in there, Reed, called a familiar voice. It's Wilson. What do you want? Isaac called back, gun still raised, to talk, alone. Wilson remained at the entrance, making no move to enter. Isaac glanced at Harriet, who nodded nervously. Stay here, he whispered, then moved cautiously toward the cave entrance. Outside, Wilson stood with his hands visible, no weapon drawn. Black's got men all over these mountains, he said without preamble. They'll find you by morning. Then why are you here instead of with them? Isaac asked, still wary. Wilson sighed heavily. Because I'm tired, Reed, tired of what Black's become, what he's turned me into. He looked up at the darkening sky. I've done things for that man that'll keep me out of heaven, if there is such a place, things I can't take back, but maybe I can do one thing right before the end. What are you saying? I'm saying there's a cabin about 3 miles north of here. Trapper I used to know. He's long gone, but the place still stands. It's stocked with some basic supplies, emergency cash for when winter catches us in these mountains. Wilson pointed toward a distant ridge. Head that way until you hit a creek, then follow it upstream. Cabins set back in a stand of pines. Isaac studied the foreman's face, looking for deception. Why help us? Like I said, one right thing. Wilson's weathered face showed the weight of his years. Black's planning to kill you both when he finds you, make it look like an accident. I've helped bury too many accidents already. You could come with us, Isaac offered, surprised at his own words. Wilson shook his head. My time's about done, but you two, you've got a chance. He started to turn away, then paused. One more thing, Black's not alone in this hunt. He's brought Raster with him. Isaac inhaled sharply. Curtis Raster was known throughout the territory as a merciless bounty hunter who tracked men for the pleasure of killing them as much as for the reward money. How long do we have? He asked. I'll lead them south for a while, buy you some time. By morning they'll figure out I've tricked them. Wilson mounted his horse. Make it count, Reed. I owe you, Isaac said simply. Wilson shook his head. No, but maybe say a prayer for me someday if you're the praying kind. With that, he rode off into the gathering darkness. Inside the cave, Harriet had heard enough to understand the situation. Can we trust him? She asked as Isaac returned. I think so, Isaac replied, already gathering their few belongings. Either way, we can't stay here. If he's telling the truth about Raster, we need to move now. They set off in the darkness, Isaac leading them carefully through the unfamiliar terrain. The moon provided just enough light to follow Wilson's directions, and within 2 hours they had found the creek and were making their way upstream. The cabin, when they finally found it, was little more than a one-room shelter with a stone fireplace, but to Harriet it looked like a palace. Isaac checked it thoroughly before allowing her inside, then secured the horses in a small lean-to behind the structure. We should be safe here for tonight, he said, lighting a lantern he'd found on a shelf. The cabin was basic but clean, with a narrow bed, a table and chair, and shelves stocked with preserved food and medical supplies. Your arm needs proper cleaning, Harriet said, finding bandages and a bottle of whiskey among the supplies. Isaac submitted to her care, removing his shirt so she could treat the wound properly. Harriet tried not to notice the lean strength of his torso, the scars that told of a hard life lived in dangerous places. She focused instead on cleaning the bullet graze, which looked worse in the lamplight than it had earlier. Thank you, Isaac said quietly as she worked. For trusting me, not many would have. Harriet's hands paused. You risked everything for a stranger. How could I not trust you? Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding deeper than words could express. For a moment, Harriet thought he might kiss her and realized with some surprise that she wanted him to. Instead, Isaac gently pulled away, clearing his throat. "You should take the bed," he said. "I'll keep watch." "You need rest too," she protested. "I'll rest easier knowing you're safe," he insisted, moving to check the cabin's single window. Harriet wanted to argue but found herself overwhelmed by exhaustion. The events of the past 2 days, the escape, the chase, the constant fear had drained her completely. She removed her boots and lay down on the narrow bed, watching as Isaac settled into the chair by the door, his rifle across his knees. "Isaac," she said softly as sleep began to claim her. "Thank you for everything," he nodded, his eyes gentle in the lamplight. "Sleep now. Tomorrow we'll figure out our next move." Harriet drifted off, feeling truly safe for the first time since her parents' death. Her last conscious thought was that, despite everything, she was glad fate had brought Isaac Reed into her life. Morning came with the soft patter of rain against the cabin's roof. Harriet woke to find Isaac still in the chair, though his position suggested he had dozed off at some point during the night. As she stirred, he came instantly alert, his hand moving to his rifle before he realized it was just her movement that had awakened him. "Good morning," she said, sitting up and smoothing her tangled hair. "Morning," he replied, moving to the window to check their surroundings. "Rain's good, makes tracking harder." Harriet joined him at the window, looking out at the misty forest. "What now?" "We eat, rest the horses, then move on." Isaac turned to the shelves, examining the supplies. "We've got beans, jerky, coffee if you want it." They prepared a simple breakfast together, the domestic activity feeling strangely normal after all they'd been through. As they ate, Isaac spread out a rough map he'd found among the cabin's supplies. "We're here," he said, pointing to an area in the mountains. "The mining town Silver Creek is about 30 miles west, 2 days' ride in this terrain if we're careful. And after that?" Harriet asked. Isaac looked up at her. "That depends on what you want." What did she want? Harriet had barely had time to think beyond escape, beyond survival. "I want a life that's my own," she said finally. "I want never to belong to anyone but myself again." Isaac nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then that's what you'll have." They finished eating and began preparing to leave, packing what supplies they could carry. As Harriet folded the blanket from the bed, a thought struck her. "Wilson," she said suddenly. "Do you think he's all right?" Isaac's expression grew serious. "I don't know. If Black realized he helped us." The implication hung in the air between them, another life potentially sacrificed for their freedom. The weight of it settled on Harriet's shoulders, a burden she hadn't anticipated. "We can't go back," Isaac said gently, reading her thoughts. "That would make his choice meaningless." "I know," she replied. "It's just so many lives destroyed by one man's greed." "Black will face justice eventually," Isaac said. "Men like him always do." They were nearly ready to depart when the sound of approaching horses reached them. Isaac moved instantly to the window, his rifle ready. 3 riders, he reported tensely. "Coming fast." Harriet's heart raced. "Black? Can't tell yet." Isaac handed her his pistol. "Take this and go out the back through the lean-to. Get to the horses and be ready to ride." "I won't leave you," she protested. "Not asking you to," he assured her. "Just be ready. If shooting starts, ride west and don't look back." Reluctantly, Harriet took the pistol and moved toward the rear of the cabin. Through the small back window, she could see their horses, still saddled and ready to go. She slipped out quietly, staying low and moving to the animals, who nickered softly at her approach. From inside the cabin, she heard voices, Isaac's, and another she didn't recognize. There was no shooting, but the conversation seemed tense. After what felt like an eternity, Isaac appeared at the lean-to entrance. "It's all right," he said, though his expression remained wary. "It's the sheriff from Silver Creek and 2 deputies. Wilson sent them." "Wilson?" Harriet asked, relief flooding through her. "He's alive, for now," Isaac said grimly. "He got word to Silver Creek about Black and Raster. Seems Black's reputation extends beyond Redemption Creek and not favorably. The sheriff's been looking for a reason to move against him for months." Harriet followed Isaac back into the cabin, where a tall man with a silver star on his chest waited, flanked by 2 younger deputies. "Miss Montgomery," the sheriff said, tipping his hat. "I'm Sheriff Tanner. We've come to escort you and Mr. Reed to Silver Creek." "Why?" Harriet asked, still cautious after all that had happened. "Because Jeremiah Black is wanted for questioning in the disappearance of 3 women over the past 2 years, Tanner replied, "and because Curtis Raster is wanted for murder in 2 territories." When Wilson's message reached us, I decided it was time to act. "How did Wilson contact you?" Isaac asked, clearly still suspicious. "He sent one of Black's own men, a young hand who was apparently having second thoughts about his employment. Boy rode all night to reach us." Tanner's weathered face showed grudging respect. "Wilson's putting his life on the line. Least we could do was respond." "What about Black?" Harriet asked. "Is he still searching for us?" "Far as we know, yes," one of the deputies answered. "But with this rain, tracking's near impossible. He's more likely to return to his ranch and send Raster after you." "Which is why we need to move," Tanner said. "Silver Creek's beyond Black's territory. Once you're there, you'll be under my protection while we build a case against him." Isaac and Harriet exchanged a look, silently weighing their options. Finally, Isaac nodded. "We appreciate the escort, Sheriff." They gathered their belongings and mounted up, joining the lawmen for the journey west. The rain continued, a steady drizzle that soaked through their clothes but provided welcome cover. They rode in formation, with one deputy in front, Harriet and Isaac in the middle, and the sheriff and second deputy bringing up the rear. "Been meaning to take Black down for years," Tanner told them as they rode. "Man's been terrorizing this part of the territory since before the war, but he's careful, never leaves evidence, always has witnesses who'll swear he was elsewhere when trouble happens." "What changed?" Isaac asked. "Wilson," Tanner said simply. "Man's been Black's right hand for 15 years if he testifies. He let the implication hang. Will he?" Harriet asked. Tanner shrugged. "Remains to be seen. He's taking an awful risk just sending that message." They rode through the day, stopping only briefly to rest the horses. By late afternoon, the rain had stopped, and they had descended from the highest peaks into a broad valley. In the distance, they could see smoke from chimneys, the first sign of Silver Creek. "We'll be there by nightfall," Tanner assured them. "Town's not much miners, a few merchants, the usual establishments, but it's civilization, and more importantly, it's outside Black's reach." As they approached a narrow pass that would lead them into the valley, the lead deputy suddenly raised his hand, signaling a halt. "Riders coming," he called back quietly. 3, maybe 4. Tanner immediately directed them off the trail into a stand of pines. "Could be nothing," he said. "Could be trouble. Either way, let's not take chances." They waited, hidden among the trees, as the riders came into view, and Harriet felt her blood run cold. At the front rode Jeremiah Black himself, his face set in a familiar expression of cold determination. Beside him was a lean man with a face like a hawk, whom she guessed must be Raster. 2 of Black's ranch hands followed behind. "Stay quiet," Tanner whispered, his hand on his pistol. The riders passed slowly, clearly searching the area. Raster frequently dismounted to examine the ground, though the rain had washed away most tracks. They were so close that Harriet could hear Black's voice as he berated the bounty hunter for losing the trail. "Find them," Black growled. "I'm paying you good money to find them." "Rain's washed everything clean," Raster replied, his voice unnervingly soft. "But they're headed to Silver Creek, only logical destination in these parts." "Then we'll wait for them there," Black decided. "I still have friends in that town, despite Tanner's interference." They rode on, unaware of the hidden observers only yards away. When they were safely past, Tanner let out a long breath. "That complicates things," he said grimly. "If they reach town before us, they'll set up an ambush." "Is there another way into Silver Creek?" Isaac asked. Tanner nodded. "Old mining trail. Longer route, rougher terrain, but it'll bring us in from the north while they're watching the main road from the east." They set off immediately, taking the alternative route. The trail was indeed rough, barely more than a game path in places, winding through dense forest and across steep slopes. Progress was slow, and darkness fell before they were halfway to town. "We'll have to make camp," Tanner decided reluctantly. "Too dangerous to navigate this trail in the dark." They found a sheltered hollow and made a cold camp, no fire, minimal movement, watches set throughout the night. Harriet and Isaac shared a blanket for warmth, sitting with their backs against a fallen log. "We're so close," she whispered, frustration evident in her voice. "We'll make it," Isaac assured her, though his own voice held uncertainty. "Black can't touch us once we're under Tanner's protection." "Can't he?" Harriet had seen too much of Black's influence to believe any protection was absolute. "He said he has friends in Silver Creek." Isaac's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Then we'll keep moving. California's still the plan, or anywhere else you want to go." Harriet leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I just want this to be over. I want to stop running." "It will be," Isaac promised. "Soon." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the forest. Finally, Harriet spoke again, her voice so quiet that Isaac had to lean closer to hear. "I've been thinking about what happens after," she said. "About your offer to help me get started somewhere new." "It still stands," Isaac assured her. "What if?" She hesitated, gathering her courage. "What if I wanted more than that?" Isaac went very still beside her. "More?" Harriet turned to face him, barely able to make out his features in the darkness. "I know we barely know each other. I know this could be just the circumstances, the danger making me feel things that aren't real." She took a deep breath. "But I don't think so. I think, even if we'd met normally in town or at a dance, I would have felt this way about you." "Harriet," Isaac began, his voice rough with emotion. "You don't have to say anything," she hurried on. "I just wanted you to know that whatever happens tomorrow or the next day, I'm grateful it was you who saw me on that auction block. I'm grateful it was you who decided I was worth fighting for." In answer, Isaac's hand found her face in the darkness, gently tracing the line of her jaw before he leaned forward and kissed her. It was a tentative kiss at first, as if he feared she might break, but when Harriet responded, it deepened into something more certain, more passionate. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing heavily, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the first night in the cabin," he admitted. "Why didn't you?" "Didn't seem right. You'd been through so much, we're still going through it. I didn't want you to think I expected anything in return for helping you." Harriet smiled in the darkness. "That's exactly why I trust you, why I've come to care for you." Before Isaac could respond, one of the deputies approached their position. "Sheriff says to get some rest. We move out at first light." They settled down to sleep, still closed together beneath the shared blanket, a new understanding between them. Despite the danger that still lurked ahead, Harriet felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. Whatever happened next, she wasn't facing it alone. Dawn brought heavy fog, blanketing the forest in ghostly white. They broke camp quickly and silently, mounting up to continue their journey to Silver Creek. The fog provided additional cover but made navigation more challenging. Tanner led them carefully, following landmarks known only to him. By mid-morning, they had reached the outskirts of Silver Creek, a collection of wooden buildings strung along a main street, with mine entrances visible on the hillsides beyond. Tanner led them in via a back route, avoiding the main road where Black might have set his trap. "My office first," the sheriff decided. "Then we'll get you two settled somewhere safe while I deal with Black." They rode quietly through town, attracting curious glances from the few people abroad in the foggy morning. The sheriff's office was a solid building of stone and wood with a small jail attached. Tanner ushered them inside, where a pot of coffee sat warming on a small stove. "Make yourselves comfortable," he said, pouring cups for everyone. "Deputy Carson, go find Judge Miller. Tell him we need him here as soon as possible. Deputy Finch, keep watch outside. Black and his men are in town somewhere." As the deputies departed on their errands, Tanner sat heavily at his desk. "Now, Miss Montgomery, I need a complete statement from you about your time at Black's Ranch. Everything you can remember, especially anything relating to other women who worked there." Harriet nodded, though the prospect of reliving those weeks was daunting. "What about Wilson? Is there any word?" "Nothing yet," Tanner admitted. "But the fact that Black's here in person suggests Wilson's cover hasn't been blown. Otherwise, Black would have stayed at the ranch to deal with him." For the next hour, Harriet recounted her experiences, the auction, the conditions at the ranch, Black's threats and violence, and what Martha had told her about previous housekeepers who had disappeared. Isaac remained by her side throughout, his quiet presence giving her strength. "That matches what we've suspected," Tanner said when she finished, "but suspicion isn't proof without witnesses willing to testify." "What about the loan document?" Isaac suggested. "Harriet saw it in Black's desk, proof he was lying about the amount." "That would be something," Tanner agreed. "Fraud is easier to prove than murder, but we'd need the actual document." A commotion outside interrupted their conversation. Deputy Finch burst through the door, his face flushed with excitement. "Sheriff, Wilson's just rode in and he's got Martha with him." Tanner was on his feet instantly. "Where are they?" "Doc Bennett's place. Wilson's been shot." They hurried to the doctor's office 2 buildings down, where they found Wilson lying on an examination table, a blood-stained bandage around his midsection. Martha sat nearby, her face drawn with fatigue and worry. "Reed," Wilson acknowledged weakly as they entered. "Miss Montgomery, glad you made it." "What happened?" Tanner asked. "Black figured it out," Wilson said, wincing as the doctor probed his wound. "Found the boy I sent to you, made him talk before killing him. I managed to get Martha out, but he was waiting for us at the north pasture." Martha looked up, her tired eyes finding Harriet's. "He was going to kill me," she said simply. "Like the others, Wilson saved my life." "And brought evidence," Wilson added, gesturing to a saddlebag beside the bed. "Everything Black's been doing for years, records of loans he changed, letters from the women who disappeared, even a deed to the Montgomery property with a forged signature." Tanner examined the documents with growing satisfaction. "This is enough to arrest him, at least. Keep him locked up while we build the rest of the case." "He's at the Silver Nugget," Martha offered. "Him and that raster creature, waiting for you all to show up on the main road." Tanner nodded grimly. "Time to end this. Reed, you stay here with the ladies and Wilson. I'll take my deputies and bring Black in." "No," Isaac said firmly. "I'm coming with you. Black's dangerous and he's desperate now. You'll need every gun you can get." The sheriff studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but you follow my lead. This is going to be done legal." Harriet caught Isaac's arm as he turned to leave. "Be careful," she said, not caring that the others could hear the emotion in her voice. Isaac squeezed her hand. "I will. This ends today, I promise." The Silver Nugget was the largest saloon in town, situated prominently on the main street. Despite the early hour, it was doing brisk business, with miners coming off night shift and ranch hands looking for diversion. Tanner, Isaac, and the 2 deputies approached cautiously, positioning themselves to cover both the front and back entrances. "Remember," Tanner warned, "we want them alive to face trial. Shoot only if they draw first." They entered the saloon in a coordinated movement, Tanner and Deputy Carson through the front, Isaac and Deputy Finch through the rear. The piano player stopped mid-song as patrons scrambled out of the way, sensing trouble. Black sat at a corner table with Raster and his 2 hands, playing cards as if they hadn't a care in the world. He looked up lazily as Tanner approached, though his eyes hardened when he spotted Isaac. "Sheriff Tanner," Black greeted him with false conviviality. "What brings you to my table so early in the day?" "Jeremiah Black, you're under arrest," Tanner announced, loud enough for the entire saloon to hear, "for fraud, kidnapping, and suspicion of murder." Black's smile never wavered. "Serious charges. I assume you have evidence beyond the word of a thieving girl and a drifter." "We have Wilson's testimony," Isaac said, "and Martha's, and all your records, which Wilson was kind enough to bring along when he left your employ." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Black's face. "Wilson," he repeated softly, "always did suspect he was getting soft in his old age." "It's over, Black," Tanner said. "Come quietly or we'll take you by force." Black exchanged a glance with Raster, some silent communication passing between them. Then, with deliberate slowness, he pushed back from the table. "Well, I know when I'm beaten," he said, raising his hands slightly. "A man in my position learns to cut his losses." It happened so quickly that later, Isaac would have trouble recalling the exact sequence of events. As Black stood, Raster suddenly flipped the table, sending cards and glasses flying. One of Black's hands drew and fired at Deputy Carson, who went down with a cry. The second hand lunged for Tanner. while Black himself drew a hidden derringer from his sleeve and aimed directly at Isaac. Isaac dove sideways as the small gun fired, the bullet grazing his temple instead of finding its intended mark between his eyes. He rolled and came up firing, his shot catching Black in the shoulder and spinning him around. The saloon erupted in chaos, with patrons diving for cover as more shots were exchanged. Tanner grappled with the ranch hand, while Deputy Finch traded fire with Raster, who had taken position behind the bar. Isaac focused on Black, who had recovered from the initial wound and was now crouched behind an overturned table, the derringer discarded in favor of his regular pistol. "Should have minded your own business, Reed," Black called out. "Could have had a good job at my ranch, maybe even made foreman now that Wilson's shown his true colors. And watch you destroy more lives," Isaac replied, keeping his position behind a thick wooden pillar. "No, thank you." "She's not worth dying for," Black taunted. "No woman is." "That's where you're wrong," Isaac said. "But it's not just about her. It's about all the people you've hurt, all the lives you've ruined with your greed." Black laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "Greed built this country, boy. Men like me tamed this wilderness while men like you just drifted through it." He suddenly lunged from behind the table, firing rapidly. Isaac felt a burning pain in his side but managed to get off 2 shots in return. The first missed, but the second caught Black in the chest, dropping him to his knees. Across the room, Tanner had subdued his opponent, and Deputy Finch had Raster pinned down behind the bar. The bounty hunter, seeing his employer fallen, suddenly threw his gun out and raised his hands. "I surrender," he called. "Don't shoot." Isaac approached Black cautiously, his gun still trained on the rancher. Black looked up at him, blood spreading across his expensive shirt, his face a mask of disbelief. "You can't," he gasped. "It's over," Isaac said simply. Black's eyes flared with one last surge of hatred. With a movement born of desperation, he reached for a boot knife and lunged upward. Isaac fired reflexively, the bullet striking Black in the center of his forehead. The rancher collapsed backward, dead before he hit the floor. The silence that followed seemed to ring in Isaac's ears. Tanner approached slowly, taking in the scene with a professional eye. "Clean shoot," he said quietly. He drew first multiple witnesses. He glanced around the stunned saloon. Anyone disagree with that assessment? No one spoke. Most had seen enough to know Isaac had acted in self-defense, and those who hadn't weren't inclined to contradict the sheriff. "You're hit," Tanner observed, nodding toward Isaac's side, where blood was seeping through his shirt. "It's not bad," Isaac said, though now that the immediate danger had passed, the pain was intensifying. "How's your deputy?" "Flesh wound to the arm, he'll live." Tanner holstered his weapon. "Let's get you to the doc." They walked back to the doctor's office, Tanner supporting Isaac as blood loss began to make him light-headed. Behind them, Deputy Finch marched Raster and the surviving ranch hand to the jail. Harriet was waiting anxiously, and her face paled when she saw Isaac's blood-stained shirt. "Isaac." "I'm all right," he assured her as the doctor helped him onto a second examination table. "Black won't be troubling anyone ever again." While the doctor tended to Isaac's wound, a deep furrow across his ribs that required stitches, but had missed anything vital, Tanner explained what had happened at the saloon. Harriet listened in silence, her hand finding Isaac's and holding tight. "It's really over," she said when Tanner finished his account. "I can hardly believe it." "Believe it," Wilson said from his bed across the room. The foreman looked pale but alert, his own wound bandaged. Black made enemies everywhere he went. Only his money and fear kept them at bay. "With him gone, the truth will come out." "What will you do now?" Isaac asked him. Wilson shrugged slightly, wincing at the movement. "If I survive this bullet hole, probably head south. Always wanted to see Texas before I die. And you, Martha." Harriet turned to the older woman who had remained quietly in the corner throughout. Martha seemed startled to be addressed. "I don't rightly know. Never thought I'd live to leave that place." "You could come with us," Harriet offered impulsively. "To California." Isaac raised an eyebrow but didn't contradict her. "There's room enough," he agreed. "Once we're both healed up enough to travel." Martha's tired face softened slightly. "That's kind. Let me think on it." The doctor finished bandaging Isaac's side and moved on to check Wilson's dressing. Both of you need rest, he pronounced. No traveling for at least 2 weeks, Tanner nodded. We'll arrange rooms at the hotel. Miss Montgomery, you and Martha will be most comfortable there. Reed and Wilson can stay here where the doc can keep an eye on them. I'm staying with Isaac, Harriet said firmly, in a tone that brooked no argument. The sheriff looked as if he might object on propriety grounds, then seemed to think better of it. As you wish. I'll have cots brought in. When they were finally alone, Wilson asleep from laudanum, Martha gone to the hotel to rest, and the doctor stepped out to tend to Deputy Carson, Harriet sat beside Isaac's bed, still holding his hand. I thought I might lose you, she said softly. Takes more than Jeremiah Black to get rid of me, Isaac replied, though his pale face and the tightness around his eyes betrayed his pain. California, Harriet mused, changing the subject. You really meant it about us going together. If that's what you want, Isaac said carefully. Though I've been thinking we might need to make a stop in Denver first. Denver. What's in Denver? A small smile touched Isaac's lips. Well, if we're going to start a new life together in California, I thought we might want to be properly married first, Harriet's breath caught. Isaac Reed, is that a proposal? Not a very romantic one, I'm afraid, he admitted. I'd get down on one knee if the doc hadn't threatened to tie me to the bed if I move. Harriet laughed, tears of joy filling her eyes. It's perfect, and yes, absolutely yes. Isaac pulled her gently toward him for a kiss, mindful of his injury. I love you, Harriet Montgomery, have since I saw you standing so brave on that auction block. And I love you, she whispered against his lips, my cowboy who fought for me with his life. 2 months later, a wagon train departed Silver Creek, bound for California, carrying among its passengers Isaac and Harriet Reed, newly married in a simple ceremony performed by Judge Miller himself. With them traveled Martha, who had decided that California's sunshine might be just what her old bones needed, and a collection of supplies and furniture purchased with money from the sale of Black's ranch, which, upon investigation, was found to rightfully belong to several of his victims, including Harriet. Wilson had recovered enough to travel, but true to his word, had headed south toward Texas. Too old to start over completely, he'd told them at their farewell dinner, but not too old to see a bit more of this country before my time's up. As their wagon crested the final hill overlooking Silver Creek, Harriet took one last look at the town where her life had changed so dramatically. The nightmare of Black's ranch seemed distant now, though she knew the memories would never completely fade. Ready? Isaac asked, his arm secure around her waist. Harriet turned to face west, toward their future. Ready. The wagon lurched forward, carrying them toward the setting sun and the promise of California, a new home. A new life, built on the foundation of a love that had proven itself stronger than fear, stronger than greed, stronger even than the hardships of the wild frontier they had survived together. And as the dust of the trail rose around them, Harriet knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they had faced Jeremiah Black together, with courage and with love.